Being a parent is hard, and it's safe to say that we're all in attempts to do our very best. In order to properly care for our children, it is absolutely essential that we choose to vaccinate them. So today I'm going to go ahead and discuss some of the reasons why parents choose not to vaccinate, the scientifically proven negative effects of not vaccinating, as well as the scientifically proven positive effects of vaccinations in order to persuade you to choose to vaccinate your child. So first, I'd like to address the opposing view. Let's begin by addressing some of the common reasons why parents choose not to vaccinate. Many individuals who are either part of the anti-vax movement or are simply on the fence about vaccinations have many concerns, whether it be about vaccines' effectiveness or its dangers. In an article from the 2019 issue of Issues and Controversies, Overviews, Pros and Cons Arguments, the Mandatory Vaccination Organization says, and I quote, "Anti-vaxxers, as they are known, question whether vaccines are effective, and some actually have linked widespread vaccinations to the rising number of children with autism, which is actually a developmental disorder. Although there is no scientific evidence proving these claims, this reason alone is actually a lot of the reason why parents either skip vaccinations or they're against vaccinations entirely. So where are these claims coming from then? If there's no scientific evidence, where are they coming from that state that one caused the other? This is where social media and the internet play a role. So bereaved or angry parents of health-altered children, they look for outlets to share their feelings on, just like anybody else, which is completely understandable. But considering the fact there's no scientific evidence proving that vaccinations lead to these illnesses or to these deaths, what happens is misinformation is being presented online, which scares parents and convinces them not to vaccinate. In a journal from the 2017 issue of Open Forum and Infectious Diseases, Tara C. Smith says, and I quote, "Although the effect of online misinformation on vaccination, attitudes, and decision-making has not been carefully quantified, parents often listed concerns similar to those on anti-vax websites when asked why they chose not to vaccinate their child." So generally when a parent chooses not to vaccinate, it's really just based off of emotion rather than the scientifically proven evidence behind the benefits of vaccinations. Furthermore, not vaccinating does have its negative effects. Now that we've addressed some of the reasons why parents don't vaccinate, let's talk about the negative effects behind not vaccinating. Thanks to vaccines, we actually have dropped cases of measles, mumps, rubella, polio drastically. So now that we're at a point where these cases are so low, why would it necessarily matter if one child was not vaccinated? In a book from the Consumer Health titled Anti-Vax Movement, Heidi Spleet says, and I quote, "People might ask why it's necessary to keep vaccinating against a disease that has become so rare in the US, such as polio. However, if vaccination programs were eliminated before the vaccine were eliminated, the small amount of cases that we do have, they would cause an outbreak." So we have to remind ourselves, although these viruses are rare today, they are only rare because of the effective use of vaccinations. And by forgetting the overall benefit of vaccinations, our children actually severely suffering. In an article from the 2016 issue of Vaccine Preventable Diseases, Martin Frigard says, and I quote, "In the 2013, the World Health Organization actually estimated that approximately 1.3 million children, or million deaths among children under the age of 5 were caused by vaccine preventable diseases." So in addition to the health risks that we've mentioned, there are also social limitations when you don't vaccinate your child. Non-vaccinated children can actually be denied public schooling in the United States in majority of public schools unless they have a health reason that prevents them. When we choose not to vaccinate our children, we're not only affecting their health, but we're also affecting their social life. Overall, vaccines are simply beneficial. And now that we've addressed some of the negative effects behind not vaccinating, let's talk about some of the benefits behind vaccinations. By vaccinating our children, we also protect those who cannot vaccinate. Although we've discussed that vaccines are effective, they're completely beneficial, unfortunately, some children don't have the option to vaccinate. These children do include those who are simply too young to have all of their vaccinations yet, those who are immune compromised or ill, and also those who might be allergic to the vaccine itself or an ingredient in it. In a book from the Encyclopedia of Education titled Immunization and Children's Physical Health, Angela Hong says, and I quote, "Immunization protects the general population from the disease. Individuals who are immunized are or have inherent protection against the disease, while those who are not immunized are protected by the unlikelihood that they'll run into another unimmunized child or a child with the virus." This is actually called herd immunity, and Hong actually goes on to state that in order for it to work properly, 80 to 95% of the population has to be vaccinated. So I do have this visual here. It does show you if no one is immunized, the entire population can contract the disease, of course. Now, if some of the population is immunized, the contagious disease does spread through some of the population still, just naturally. Now, if most of the population is immunized, the spread of the disease is actually contained. But as she mentioned, 80 to 95% of the people have to be vaccinated. So if we can vaccinate our child, it is important that we do so. With that being said, in addition to protecting our current population and the children right now, by vaccinating our children, we have the ability to protect future generations of children. In a website generated in January of 2018 by the U.S. Department of Human and Health Services, the organization says, and I quote, "Vaccinations have reduced and in some cases eliminated many diseases that killed or severely disabled people just a few generations ago. Thanks to vaccines' effectiveness, we actually have not had a case of smallpox since 1949. We still give our children vaccinations today for certain viruses because they are not completely eradicated. They are not completely wiped out. But by choosing to vaccinate, we have the ability to potentially lead our generations into having some of these viruses completely eradicated. So it is essential that we do that in order to benefit our future communities. So let's go ahead and discuss what we have talked about today. Parents who don't vaccinate, they do choose not to, mostly due to concerns around vaccines' effectiveness or its dangers. But as we've talked about through scientific research, vaccines are completely effective and safe for almost every child. By thinking about vaccines through an emotional standpoint, we pushed aside the decades of research and scientifically proven evidence that states that vaccines are effective. If we do stick together, we do encourage each other to speak to our healthcare professionals when we do have fears based around certain vaccines. We're bound to see more children being vaccinated for these diseases that are vaccine preventable, less children being infected with these diseases, as well as even more deaths being prevented by the effective use of vaccinations.